This is CEO Insights. I'm Marilyn de Guzman with investingnews.com. I'm speaking with Rick Mark, President and CEO of Harvest Gold. Welcome, Rick.
Good morning, Marilyn, and thank you.
Yes, good to have you. So let's start our conversation with Harvest Gold's value proposition. Discuss why, what sets you apart. Give us the rundown of what your company is.
Well, I think in terms of the business of the company, which is gold exploration, I'll just set it up this way, Marilyn. And when people ask, do you have any chance at all? I think we do. And I'm going to start it by saying we're in the Abitibi Greenstone Belt, which is a very well-known mine-producing belt. So immediately, investors and geologists know we're in the right place. We're also in the province of Quebec, which I think is a huge advantage, having worked in British Columbia and looking now at what Quebec offers in terms of the way their government, particularly in northern Quebec, supports exploration. And they have a long history of supporting exploration. So their funding mechanisms are strong. They have excellent workforce. The nature of the property package we have in Quebec, it's close to things. It's accessible by road. And that means the cost of exploration is relatively very inexpensive if you're compared to, say, a helicopter flying in northern British Columbia. So the Abitibi Belt is important. Quebec as a jurisdiction is fantastic. We're in something called the Urban Berry Belt as we go further down. Now, the exciting thing about the Urban Berry Belt, it contains a deposit called Windfall, which Goldfields just bought from Mosseau mining. Now, the interesting thing about that as well is that the belt itself is basically owned by Goldfield, except for the 3 large properties that Harvest has in the belt. And I invite people to go and look at the opening front page of our website, and you'll see the map that describes, if you like, our neighborhood. And then within those 3 properties, and it's been the reason that Crescat Capital, who is a very well-regarded institutional investor in this space out of Colorado, has supported our work. Each of our 3 properties is intersected by a through-going structure, if you like. And in those structures, typically in the Abitibi, it's those structures and the cross-cutting splays across those structures where the big mines are found. So each of our 3 properties is intersected by one of these through-going structures, totaling about 50 kilometers of strike length. So we're not in moose pasture, we're not in nowhere, we're right in the middle of a known mineralized belt. We're surrounded by a recognized major. And we also then have been able to introduce ourselves to the beginnings of support from the Quebec government and funds. The last thing I'll say is that our joint venture partner, Vior, is our partner on our flagship property called Mosseau. Interestingly, Vior, their management team is basically a Cisco Mining's management team. In January, Vior made a decision to take the Cisco Mining Group, who, Marilyn, have been working in this belt for 10 years. So the people that are our partners are actually the most experienced and best partners we could have. As an example, their VP Exploration is joining us next week with our geo team for the second time, in this case, establishing drill targets on the Mosseau property. And the last thing I'll say in terms of timing, this is the best time to look at Harvest Gold. We spent the last almost 2 years now preparing for drilling, and I think the work we've done to get our Mosseau property ready for drilling is exemplary, as we have a tremendous geological team. So that's from the big down to the small and where we are today, Marilyn.
Right. So, you mentioned your current flagship is the Mosseau project. Could you maybe talk a little bit more about that? Why makes it a compelling asset, and why are you focusing that right now?
Well, the reason we took it on, we originally started with our second property called the Urban Berry property, which is right on the belt itself. Too immature, if you like. Not enough exploration done. On the belt, 17 kilometers of strike length. but it's one that requires, from the beginning, more work. The nice thing about Mosseau, the northern area of Mosseau has been drilled over many years. And if one were to look at the 43-101, you would see the drilling in the 80s occurred every year, a little bit of drilling. The nature of the property in those days was that it was owned by many different people. Longtime family ownership, prospectors, in some cases, the Quebec government through SIDEX owned some northern land, and drilling was done haphazardly, I would say. And that was an opportunity for Vior. And what they did over 5 years is they amalgamated those various properties into Mosseau. Now, the other interesting part for investors to know is that the central area of Mosseau has had almost no work done on it. So the northern area has historic drilling, some very nice results. We know gold is there. There's 49 surface samples, which is, according to my geologists, the beginnings of some attention. And the drill holes that people will look up, they'll find there's some very nice intersections. It hasn't been put together because nobody's seen it as a whole. And so what our geologists have been able to do over the last year and a half is compile the data sets related to the north. And exciting, the central area, which has not been worked on to any extent, has now had prospecting and geochemistry, and our news releases just over the last week or so are starting to talk about the results we've got in the central area. So our next news release will talk to the markets about the specific targets that we have in the central area and the north as we prepare for drilling.
What are the timelines for those? Could you talk a bit more about that?
In a perfect world, what we anticipate doing is going back to the market for financing in June and drilling in a perfect world starting July the 15th. So the timing is very good for people who have not heard about Harvest Gold or are not aware of what we're doing.
Right. And I think one of the things, aspects of a company that investors are always interested in to know is their technical team, the people behind these exploration. Could you maybe highlight some of the aspects of your technical team, the track record and expertise?
Well, I hold our technical team up against any junior. They've all stayed with me. We have 5 guys, at least the fellows that have worked us in the past. I'll start with Louis Martin, who is our head geo in Quebec. He's got a tremendous experience across the Abitibi for 40 years. He came to us through, and Louis really been the driver of all the work we're doing. He's a detail-oriented guy, classic lifetime geologist, very experienced, understands this part of the world very well. He was brought to us by Pat Donnelly, one of our directors, who's been with us about 8 years. I met Pat when he was working with Solomon Partners in Toronto 20 years ago when I was running BMS Ventures. So he was on the other side of the line. He's since morphed into managing junior companies. He's been our director, but he's a geologist as well, has a vast experience. We added Warren Bates about 7 years ago, and Warren has worked all over the world, particularly in gold, but as many of these guys do, Marilyn, and they're all guys. They've been all over the world in various commodities. Warren has been extremely helpful. We took 2 years to find this opportunity, 2 years, and we're very pleased that we did that, and that team was able to do it. Henry Omack, we met 5 years ago. Henry and his partner, Dave Caulfield, founded Equity Explorations. Brilliant guy, low-key, but insightful. They've all been involved. And then the last guy I want to mention is Neil Richardson, who worked with me at VMS Ventures. Neil is now the VPX for Hud Bay. His budgets are something we could only dream about. Neil actually worked on the Windfall project years ago. So when we first looked at the Urban Berry project, it was Neil who said, Ricker, we got to get this. These cross-cutting structures look interesting. And so that's the group that comes together. We call them together every couple of months. Louis and I and Warren do the hard work of the day-to-day, and then we bring the team together. And as I mentioned, now we have access to the Vior team, and their experience specifically in this belt, Maryland, is remarkable. So I put that geo team against anybody, and I would say to investors, you better check to make sure the geo team is strong, because that's the business. That's the business of the company. So I say to our investors, these guys are tremendous. They're experienced, and they make the right decisions.
No. And obviously, I think any investor who's interested to know, there's certainly know more about the bios and the track record. Their
Yeah.
bios
Yeah.
are listed on your website.
Yes, they are.
I've seen that. So I wanted to get your, maybe you could comment, like obviously the gold prices have been, near all-time high records. How are you leveraging that, that bull market to advance?
Well, it's interesting because as I talk to other guys running these junior companies, it hasn't filtered down to the junior financings as well as we might expect, and as well as we know historically it did. My premise there is I think that certainly the Vancouver brokerage area, to a large part, is aged out. There are fewer younger brokers who are in this space. They made a lot of money on marijuana. There's a lot of money made on NASDAQ. Play NVIDIA instead of a gold exploration company. Bitcoin, crypto. There's all kinds of places where the returns are, if you like, in the same neighborhood as discovery returns. That's not to say discovery returns are not as they always were. The discovery moment in a company's history will make investors a great deal of money. And so I think the audience has been reduced. It's interesting, we have Crescat, who own 20% of the company. They spoke of us last Friday on their weekly broadcast. I was very pleased to know they're watching. We don't bother them often, although I'm going to be speaking to Quentin again next week, because we're at a point again where we can use Quentin's feedback, another great geologist, in our final drill targeting selections. So that's important. We've also found our way into Europe organically. I've found a group of retail investors who I would describe as tremendously sophisticated. These guys do their work, and that's the dream investor, someone who understands the junior space, the early stage exploration companies, understands the return that's available to you, which is dramatic. I've experienced it. As I mentioned, VMS Ventures was our lead company. I think I mentioned VMS. We made a copper discovery, a high-grade copper discovery in Manitoba early in our first drill program, very much where Harvest Gold is today. So if I showed you our map with the structures running through the properties, our map describing the opportunity with VMS Ventures was a road between Thompson and Snow Lake and Flin Flon. And above the road, there was no till cover, no soil cover, Maryland, and all kinds of discoveries had been made. Below the road was the soil cover. And our premise using that map was that there's deposits hiding below the till. So we went into Toronto, raised money at 6 cents, announced a discovery. Griffiths McBurney at the time invested at 6 cents, and they brokered our $1.50 financing when we raised $20 million in that same year, because in our early drilling, we made a discovery. And that's the kind of hope that juniors bring to the table. So we're still sitting with this map, and Quentin's the technical leader at Crescat, his comment, that's why this is important. These guys are sitting on these structures in each of these properties. And now 6 months later, we're able to point to specific targets along those structures on Mosseau. And that's why this is such a good time for investors to look at us ahead of drilling.
Interesting. So I think you've alluded to it earlier. Maybe you can talk a bit more about some of the upcoming catalysts investors should expect in the coming months from the company.
Well, I don't think there's any question. We want to get the targets out to the investment audience so they understand that we've got some well thought out opportunities here. We've got at this point a 5,000 meter program laid out, approximately $1 million. We're drilling in July under our plan, and results will come out sometime in September, October. I think, again, you want to be holding the stock before results. And that's kind of where it is. And, it's as investors, we need to be careful that we don't put our life savings into a junior. It's a high risk opportunity. What I mentioned at the beginning, Mary-Ellen, and walking down from Abitibi to Quebec to Urban Berry Belt to our partners, to our team, to the opportunity, clearly a gold-bearing environment, is that we're, if you like, de-risking it as much as possible. But obviously, there's still risk. But after discovery, you find that it's more difficult for a company to keep making discoveries, and the stock may not move the same way it does that first time. So we're in the business of discovery. That's what Harvest Gold is doing. And we're looking to make that discovery first in Mosseau. And one of the things Neil pointed out to me very early is I said to him, are we going to find 500,000 ounces and truck it down to the Windfall operation? He said, no. We're looking for multiple deposits on Mosseau. And so that's the optimism one needs. And it can be backed up. And I think there's a certain level of confidence by the work that we're doing that optimism is real, that there is a great opportunity here. It's still risky, though, Mary-Ellen, and I think your viewers probably understand that if they're watching this program.
Right. We'll leave it at that, and looking forward to speaking with you again down the road once you've got some more results and these catalysts come to fruition.
Very nice to meet you, and I look forward to having a chance to talk again. And to the audience, thanks for watching. Please take a look. The symbol is HVG, and I'm happy to talk to you at any time if you'd like to reach out. Thank you, Mary-Ellen.
Right. And thanks everyone for watching. Join us again next time for another edition of CEO Insights.